Hello, my friends. This is Robb Ryerse. This is the It's Pronounced Ryerse podcast. And I want to welcome you to your 35 minutes of political enlightenment. We're going to have a great time today. There is so much going on in the world of politics. But before we get to that, this podcast is called It's Pronounced Ryerse, and I've heard from some of you who don't love the name. Sorry about that. It's not like you can change your last name, right? And even this week, 4 times so far this week, I have had to say to someone, it's pronounced Ryerse. It's one of those things. So, it's the name of the podcast. We'll see if it sticks. I'm sure it will, right? Well, we're going to talk about politics today. We're going to talk about politics and the intersection of faith and politics and how all that stuff gets mixed up together and what it should look like. Our big idea, I'm going to be telling one of the biggest lessons I learned when I ran for Congress and sharing some of that with you. There's some really, big things happening in the world of politics. The Senate Democrats defeated the increasing the minimum wage to $15. One of the most popular policy positions in the country, red or blue, left or right, raising the minimum wage is immensely popular. So let's just not pass that thing. It's craziness. Voting is happening in Louisiana's special election. Hopefully, more folks are voting for Gary Chambers than anybody else. I don't know if you saw this. If you follow Charles Booker, who rose to fame in the primary for Democratic's nominee for the U.S. Senate to run against Mitch McConnell, Charles Booker kind of took fire caught fire right at the end. His campaign did, and I think that if early voting had started 2 weeks later than it did, Charles Booker would have been the Democratic nominee facing Mitch McConnell. Well, Charles posted on Instagram, and I think he posted on Twitter, that folks asked him if he's going to run for office again. And he said, I'm going to have an answer on Sunday. So, very exciting. I got my fingers crossed. I don't have any insider information on this, but I've got my fingers crossed that Charles is going to announce that he is going to be running against Rand Paul. Wouldn't that be amazing? I think Charles would be fantastic. So hopefully we'll have some news to comment on that next week. Those of you that are watching on Facebook Live, thanks for being here. If you've got any questions, comments, throw those in the chat and respond to that. Those of you that are listening to the podcast, you can always email me at rob@robbryerse.com, R-O-B-B, rob@robbryerse.com. And that's how you can get in touch. Find me on any of those social channels. I would love to chat with you. So, you ready to get to it? Let's get to it. Let's hit the rundown. Talk about some of the things that have caught my eye that have been happening over the last few days. First of all, it is our coronaversary. Whew. Where were you a year ago today? I'll tell you where I was. I was on a bus driving from West Virginia to Florida, where we were going to have a Vote Common Good event. And it was on that bus where we were debating, do we need to shut this thing down? States were closing, the pandemic was hitting, and it was very clear that our level of seriousness was going to be rising as we took on the pandemic together as a country. We decided to shut things down. It was a sad day saying goodbye to the bus. And heading home, met my son at the airport as he was flying home from college. And we drove home and we stayed there for a long time. And now we're a year later. And we have added to our vocabulary phrases like social distancing. We have quarantined and self-isolated. And it has been a year that none of us could have predicted It's a crazy thing looking at your Facebook memories and seeing what you were doing a year ago, right? But hope is on the way. And I got to tell you, I'm feeling really hopeful for two reasons. One, because I'm getting my first vaccine shot tomorrow, and I'm pretty excited about that on Saturday. The second thing is that I watched Joe Biden's speech to the nation. He addressed the nation and talked to us. And I got to tell you, one of my main critiques and criticisms of Donald Trump was that he just absolutely failed at one of the fundamental roles of the President of the United States, which is to be the comforter in chief. Think of Ronald Reagan after the Challenger explosion. Think of Bill Clinton after the Oklahoma City bombing. Think of George W. Bush standing in the rubble of the World Trade Center. Think of President Obama time and time again after shootings. I think of him singing Amazing Grace at that funeral. And Donald Trump was absolutely incapable of showing any empathy, any comfort for people. So many lives lost, so much disruption, and he constantly made it about him. And it frustrated me so much that he failed to do this thing that we need in our president. And Joe Biden addressed the nation for the first time last night in a national televised address. And it was the most empathetic speech I think I've ever heard in my life. And listen, I am not a Joe Biden fan. I've joked that I never in my life would have dreamed that I would work so hard to get elected a president who I barely want to be president. I'm a Bernie guy. You know, I check out this awesome Bernie Sanders mosaic that my mother-in-law made and sent me. Now amongst the icons of my office, I'm a Bernie guy. But I got to tell you, Joe Biden won me over with that speech. That's the kind of president we need. And that doesn't mean I don't have policy differences with him, because I do. Significant ones, big ones. And I will continue to be vocal about those things. But I got to tell you, Joe Biden won me over with his speech. And it doesn't hurt that stimmy checks are finally going out. The House and the Senate have passed a new bill to help with the economic recovery from the pandemic. And I got to tell you, maybe you might not know about this, but one of my big criticisms of the stimulus bills that were passed previously was that they left out a significant group of people who need help. I don't know if you know this or not, but college students did not receive stimulus checks in the last two rounds. First time it went out, second time it went out. If you were, I think the cutoff was 17 years old. If you were, we got stimulus money per child up to 17 years old. But if you were 18 years old, 19 years old, 20, 21, and a dependent still because you're in college, you're out of luck. And this was significant to me because, frankly, I've got two of those kids. I've got two people that qualify in that way. It's been fixed in this stimulus bill. Those checks are going out, and I know the direct deposits are being made, if we're going to be super precise, and they will include stimulus to help college students, which I think is an absolutely fantastic thing. College students have been hit so hard through the course of this pandemic. Their lives have been so disrupted. We already make it so difficult on them, and in terms of the profound amount of debt that they have to take on to be able to get their education. I mean, do you remember how expensive textbooks are? I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I'm just so very happy that one of the big problems with the stimulus bills in the past has been fixed this time around. So as you get and spend or save or do whatever you're going to do with your $1,400, just give a little thanks that there's some 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are getting those stimulus checks as well for the first time. And I think it's really going to help. So that's a good thing. My goodness, did you watch the Oprah interview with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry? That was amazing. Wow. What a fascinating conversation. And I got to admit to you, I watched The Crown. My wife and I have watched every episode of The Crown and have, spent time Googling, did that really happen? Was it really like that? And when we would read each other articles we had found and confirming things, and it's been a fascinating window into what it's like at Buckingham Palace. But my goodness, the Oprah interview with Meghan and Prince Harry was so eye-opening. And here's the thing, and listen, I have had just a tiny bit of experience with this. I mean, just if Meghan Markle's experience is a loaf of bread, my experience with this is a crumb compared to that. But I've had some experience with being in, the public spotlight, having news articles written about you, having people comment about you on websites and on Facebook and in the comments section, and I've had a little taste of that. And it does damage to your mental health. And I think one of the things I'm walking away from this Oprah interview with Meghan and Prince Harry is the reminder that celebrities are real people. Like, they're not just characters for us to enjoy, consume, criticize, tear down. They are real human beings. The press needs to treat them that way. Looking at you, Piers Morgan. But you know what? It's so easy to just point the finger at the press and say, oh, it's all their fault. If they did it differently, then things would be different. No, the reality is we've got to think of celebrities differently. We need to change our expectations about what we consume about their lives, what we expect of them. And listen, I wish Meghan Markle and Prince Harry nothing but peace and rest and solitude, because man, they have been through so much. Wow, what a conversation. Big news in the religious world this week, in the white evangelical world. Beth Moore, one of the biggest authors of Bible studies and Christian literature, announced that she's leaving the Southern Baptist Convention. She's no longer going to be a part of the Southern Baptist Convention for a variety of reasons. One is their kind of continued support, this continued support for Donald Trump that exists in so much of Southern Baptist Convention and their churches. The insistence by so many that critical race theory is heresy and anti the gospel of Jesus Christ, which just is mind-boggling to me, and how they have continued to marginalize and mistreat women and abuse survivors within the Southern Baptist Convention. And so Beth Moore is making her exit, her Bethxit. It's not easy to say, but it's kind of fun to think about. She is on her way out of the Southern Baptist Convention. And listen, this is big news. Beth Moore is a multi-million-dollar seller of Christian literature in Christian bookstores like Lifeway, which is owned by the Southern Baptist Convention. I mean, Beth Moore is a powerhouse in the Christian publishing world. And where is she going to end up? How are things going to go? It is absolutely fascinating to see. And listen, I got to say this. I hope that Beth Moore is deconstructing. And listen, deconstruction, when you go through faith deconstruction, when you go through a political deconstruction, it is complicated and it's messy and sometimes it's slow. It can be much slower than other people like, than other people want, but progress is progress. And my hope is that what we're going to see emerge from what's happening with Beth Moore is more and more people saying, you know what, I'm not going to stick with these institutions that are doing more harm than good. I'm on my way out, I'm leaving, and that's how it's going to go. And so I wish Beth Moore nothing but the best. I wish her courage on this journey that she's on. It's going to be exciting to see. Now, before we talk about Lauren the Liar, my friend Josh jumped in on Facebook and asked about Ravi Zacharias. Listen, the stuff with Ravi Zacharias, and if you don't know who Ravi Zacharias is, he was a world-famous apologist and evangelist and teacher of Christian theology and particularly apologetics, defending the faith. And it turns out that he also was unfaithful to his wife, apparently paid off mistresses with money from his ministries, and did all sorts of kind of shady and difficult things. It's really a tough story to think about and to consume. I would encourage you to check out some of the stuff, and maybe we should be a bit more skeptical of our leaders. Speaking of being skeptical of leaders, Lauren Boebert, who is the gun-toting Congresswoman from Colorado, spoke on the House floor this week against a bill that would expand background checks before you're able to purchase a gun and a firearm. And in that, she told a little story. And I'd like for you to see that and hear it if you're on Facebook Live, or hear it if you're listening on the podcast. So here is Congresswoman Lauren Boebert on the floor of the House. Just about 20 seconds. Listen to what she has to say.
There was an altercation outside of my restaurant where a man was physically beat to death. There were no weapons involved. He was beat to death by another man's hands. I have a lot of young girls who work in my restaurant, and we needed an equalizer.
Well, hopefully that sound came through for you, because I unplugged my earbuds and so I didn't hear it. So hopefully that came through for you, and you were able to hear Lauren Boebert telling a story about why the waitresses at her restaurant that she owns in Colorado, Shooter's Grill, carry firearms. And the reason is because a man was viciously beaten to death outside of her restaurant, and she needed the women that work for her need to be able to protect themselves, because apparently this restaurant is in such a terrible area that and so hey, thanks for those of you that chimed in to say that you could hear. That's awesome. Appreciate that help. So listen, so Lauren Boebert tells this story. The problem is it didn't happen. What she just said on the floor of the House of Representatives is a lie, is a fabrication. It did not happen. This is from the Colorado Sun. Boebert may not have risen to political prominence without Shooter's Grill. But there is some truth bending in how Shooters became an armed food emporium. In a story Boebert has made an integral part of her personal lore in speeches and interviews, she has often repeated that she decided to arm herself and her waitresses because she feared for everyone's safety after a man was murdered in the alley behind her new restaurant. There was a violent altercation in our back alley where a man was physically beaten to death, and it immediately prompted the question, how will I defend my people? So I began to carry that day, Boebert told the Durango Herald last year. The Rifle Police Department, Rifle's the town in Colorado, the Rifle Police Department has no record of such a murder. A man did die on the sidewalk down the street from shooters in the early morning of August 22nd, 2013. Initially, it was investigated as a possible homicide, but an autopsy determined the man died from a drug overdose. Lauren Boebert is lying. She has fabricated a story that bolsters her already held position that she ought to be able to carry a gun anywhere and everywhere that she wants to, and that guns are the answer to violence. She's fallen into the myth of redemptive violence. There is this violent, she claims this violent story that took place outside of her restaurant, and it's all made up. It did not happen. It didn't happen. She's lying to you. Makes you wonder what else she's lying to you about. Things just keep getting worse. I've talked over the last few weeks on this podcast about what's going on in New York, what's going on in Arkansas. Man, it just keeps getting worse. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is now facing a sixth accusation from a woman saying that he was sexually inappropriate with her. There is a report today, I think it's a headline on the Drudge Report. Yeah, I read the Drudge Report. You should read the Drudge Report too. Headline on the Drudge Report that could be as many as 30 accusations of sexual impropriety by the governor of New York, who wrote a book about leadership in the midst of a pandemic. And now, almost the entire Democratic congressional delegation, including AOC, including Jamal Bowman, including Jerry Nadler, and a host of others, are now calling on Governor Cuomo to resign. And there's discussions that even impeachment could be on the horizon. My goodness, can you believe how fast political fortunes turn? This is a guy who wrote a book about how great of a leader he was during the pandemic, in contrast to Donald Trump. And it turns out he was fudging the numbers to make it look better, and he was harassing women and has a pattern of that. And he's a bully. My goodness. I used to be the co-host of a podcast called This Guy's Got to Go. Starting to feel like maybe we ought to do a This Guy's Got to Go episode about Andrew Cuomo. Speaking of people that need to go, the entire Arkansas legislature needs to go. These folks are ridiculous. They have passed a Stand Your Ground bill, which makes Arkansas more dangerous. They have passed a bill basically eliminating women's ability to get reproductive health care, including in cases where rape and incest have taken place. And now they have further marginalized and oppressed kids, trans kids. I don't know. Maybe I should be announcing that I'm running for state senate here in Arkansas or something. We got so much work to do. Listen, each week I make a recommendation to you, tell you about something that I got going on, something that I've seen, something that I've read, something I've listened to. Most of my recommendations have been about entertainment, things like Semler's amazing album Preacher's Kid or Ted Lasso on Apple Plus. Today I want to recommend something to you it's a little bit experiment that I'm trying. It's not the band Quiet Riot, for those of you that might be watching on the podcast, watching on Facebook Live, where I've got some graphics. No, so I don't know about you, but I have just felt completely overwhelmed by my email lately. Just completely, email has become this thing that has just lived in my head and all around me, and I feel like I can't escape it, and I got to do something. So I started experimenting with this idea of only checking my email twice a day And then when I do check my email, I'm going to read it one time. That's where I'm calling it riot mail. Read it one time. So what I'm doing is I'm checking my email twice a day. I'm setting aside enough time to be able to handle everything that's in my email, everything that needs to be taken care of. But I'm only going to read it one time. I'm not going to read this email and then have it occupy my brain for days until I finally maybe get around to it, and then I've got all this email piled up that's kind of I'm thinking about, that's fogging my brain, and then I'm feeling bad because I'm feeling guilty and beginning to shame spiral because I haven't answered this email. No. I'm experimenting with doing away with all of that. 2 times a day, 10:30 in the morning, 4:30 in the afternoon. I'm setting aside time, sitting down with my email, and I'm going to read my email one time. Read it one time. I'm going to read it and I'm going to do whatever needs to be done with it. And then I'm going to archive it or delete it or unsubscribe from this stupid list I don't even know how I got on, or whatever it might be. And then I am done. I like experimenting with productivity hacks. I like trying things like this. My poor wife, oh my goodness. She's got to hear me talk about, like, hey, I'm trying this now. I'm doing this now. It's ridiculous. But so I'm experimenting with this. I would love for you to experiment with me if you are interested. I'd love to hear how you kind of manage your inbox. I don't know how. Oh, here's the other thing. I turned off all the notifications and the badges, so I have no idea how much email I have. And I'll find out at 4:30. So a little thing that I'm trying. Love for you to try it with me. Hey, remember that time I ran for Congress? You remember that? I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. 2018, I threw my hat in the ring and ran as a progressive Republican. Yeah, that's a real thing. In the Republican primary against Steve Womack here in Arkansas's 3rd Congressional District. And I learned so much. I had no idea what I was doing. And I mean, there's a lot to say about, what that experience was like and what the expectations were going in, and then how things changed in the midst of that. And it felt like we were making it up as we went along. And you might look up the results and see, hey, this guy only got 15% of the vote. Yeah, I got 15% of the vote, not having a clue what I was doing. And having even less money to support it. And there are so many lessons that I learned as a result of that. So many things that I've been able to teach other candidates or reinforce with other candidates. So many things that I've seen other candidates do that are so much more effective than what we did. But here's one of the things that I learned through the course of my campaign. Is that organization is the secret weapon of grassroots campaigns. Organization, it's a secret weapon. If a grassroots campaign, whether it's one for a local office or if it's one for Congress or any race, if a grassroots campaign is going to be successful, it has got to be organized. It's got to be organized. A grassroots campaign with little money needs to make up the gap with organization. You can't afford to make mistakes. I mean, literally. The campaigns that are funded by big corporate PAC money, I mean, they can make mistakes left and right, no problem at all. They'll just, buy their way out of it with advertising and with mailers. But a grassroots campaign has got to be organized. You can't just tweet or post on Facebook and hope that things are going to happen. There's got to be an actual structure, an actual plan for getting volunteers plugged in as people get excited. There's got to be organization for how you're going to reach voters. There's got to be organization for communication, for fundraising. There's got to be organization for a get out the vote effort. There's got to be organization. And that means, and this was one of the big problems that I had as a candidate, the candidate can't do it all. You got to have a team, an well-organized team to make it happen. I remember one of the things that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said in, I think it was late 2017, that became a bit of a mantra for some of us. And it was this. She would say, they can outspend us, but they can't out-organize us. Isn't that good? They can outspend us, but they can't out-organize us. Now, maybe you're listening to this going, okay, I'm not running for office. Why are we talking about this? I have no desire to run for office. Okay. But here's the thing that grassroots campaigns need. They need experienced volunteers. Experienced and willing people who will plug in to help out, helping them be organized, to be effective, to beat the big money campaigns. You can't organize, empty cells in a spreadsheet. It's people that we're talking about. And how do you get those people? You get those people through volunteering. So volunteer. Maybe you're not running for office, have no plans to ever, but you care about who represents us in government. Well, I would tell you this, the thing that candidate that you love needs is a willing and experienced volunteer. And you say, well, I don't have any experience. Exactly. That's why you begin to volunteer, so you can get the experience. You are what we need. Sometimes people just need to be asked to do something. So consider this me asking you to volunteer. Get experience. We need it. We need you. We need you. Listen, my friends, I love talking to you each week. These 35 minutes of political enlightenment that I bring your way here on Facebook Live. We also do this over at Apple Podcasts. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, I would encourage you, plead with you to subscribe, to give us a 5-star review. Hey, and write a little review about how this is your favorite political podcast that you listen to. This is the best podcast out there about the intersection of faith and politics, originating in the state of Arkansas, hosted by a progressive Republican pastor, right? I mean, we got to be if that's the category, this is it. So give us a 5-star review. Subscribe at Spotify. We're on there now. Subscribe at Google Play if that's your thing. Those of you Android folks, you can do that. And if you want to get in touch, find me on social media. Robb Ryerse. It's pronounced Ryerse, by the way. Also, shoot me an email, rob@robbryerse.com. Remember that Rob is with 2 B's. And because I'm a pastor, I want to leave you with a benediction. Some words to help shape you. These are words that come to mind as we think about the coronaversary and the words of Joe Biden last night. As we think about people like Meghan Markle, Beth Moore, all of us trying to figure out what we can do to try to make the world a better place, make a difference in things. These words come from the 13th century poet Rumi. It's very simple, but very important what he has to say. Rumi says this: if all you can do is crawl, start crawling. If all you can do is crawl. Start crawling. It's great to be with you, my friends. Till we chat again next week, be here now.